Welcome to Clariot Noir. The following recordings are based on real events in Bridal Veil Lake. Stories come directly from the people who have experienced them. Listener discretion is advised.
The Tenant by Faith Rybinski. The Scout House is the site of my oddest and most grotesque experiences while working in Bridal Veil Lake. I don't live in the town, and I quite despise it, to be frank. However, the real estate market there is constantly moving because there is a high turnover of desirable locations. Although once people move in, they can't wait to get out. I feel slightly guilty for selling in Bridal Veil Lake, and I often do try to steer people away from it. You get what you pay for, right? Yes, the prices here are a little bit lower than similar looking towns, but with the frequency of the sales I'm making, it's quite hard to look the other way. So, the Scout House. I found a dead body there. Well, dead bodies. And that would be mundane almost in comparison to the other tales I've seen that you've published, if it were the end of the story, but it's not. The developers that I had brought to the Scout House the first time were old friends of mine from school. I took them over for a walkthrough because they were curious about the building and why it hadn't been repurposed or demolished yet. It sits on a lot big enough for a condo complex, I think. The perfect site to develop if it had been somewhere else. The crew made the mistake of going up the condemned steps to the loft on the second floor. It wasn't necessary, really, from my perspective. You could tell it was a teardown right away. The jewel was really in the lot size and the location. But somehow they made it up the condemned stairwell, and they made it back down without falling clear through the wood. "There's a dead person up there," one of them said. I went up myself just to make sure, and that was my introduction to William Christopher. I found him slumped against the wall, a young veteran in partial army fatigues and a heavy wool sweater, also green. His unblinking eyes were blue, and there was a look of pure stoicism about him. How he died was unclear to me. I checked him for breathing, and I checked him for a pulse just to be sure before calling the police. And that's how I learned the name of Williams and a little bit of his story. This small town station wasn't tight-lipped with their stories. He was known to police, respected even, I'd say. Christopher had served overseas in the Canadian Armed Forces and returned a changed man like so many others. He couldn't cope with what he'd seen or done, perhaps, and his life seemed to unravel, though not as you might expect. Certainly, he'd become homeless and mingled freely with that community in the gorge and at the utmost fringes of Tour Hill. However, they said that he wasn't being monitored for any form of addiction, for drugs or for alcohol. And apparently, he didn't even smoke cigarettes. He was easy to talk to, if a bit reserved, they said, an anomaly to the police, who believed that he might have some form of mental illness that they couldn't identify. "He was a good guy," one of the constables said, as the ambulance took away the body. The same constable called me later to inform me of the cause of the death. "Heart attack," he said. "No foul play suspected." The constable said he'd called me to share the news with the intention of helping me to sleep better that night. My developer clients declined on the property anyway. A few months later, interested in the bait of the Jewel development site, I began actively promoting it to my own clients. An international development group showed great interest and sent over a couple of their agents to visit with me. I opened the front door for them and closed it immediately. A body, another dead body. I had seen it on the stairwell leading up to the second floor or down from the second floor. Whatever. I apologized to my guests and I rescheduled the viewing, citing unsafe conditions inside as I locked up the door and apologized. My guests drove off in their car, and I called the police to report the second body. As I awaited the police alone, I unlocked the door and opened it up in curiosity. It was slightly more decayed than William Christopher's had been, I noticed. However, the body was dressed identically. Fatigues, big green sweater. Another veteran, I thought. So sad. I left appeased, and I heard nothing about it from the caring constables. Before the rescheduled viewing the following week, I decided it would be prudent to take a quick walkthrough in advance this time to ensure that the property was viewable with no foul offenses. I brought my adult son with me in case any minor handiwork would be required to make the tour at least bearable, sellable. Upon unlocking and opening the door this time, though, the dead man was sprawled right at the bottom of the stairs, advancing every time I'd visited. The decay was worse. My son ran out and vomited into the weeds while I phoned the police for a third time. I recognized the constable's name as he came over shortly thereafter and he introduced himself in the gravel driveway. We walked up to the front door together. My son stayed in the car. In front of the door, the constable asked me to step backward behind him, as if the door itself were dangerous. I could hear my son throwing up again, and I followed the constable through the front door, advancing slowly. Constables and emergency personnel were setting up in the driveway and coming past me, working through various tasks like little insects. Among the shuffling and buzzing of people, I headed back outside to calm my son and take him home. I glanced over at the stretcher as it was being loaded into an ambulance, and I saw army boots sticking at the end. Another veteran? I asked the constable casually. He answered with an expression of panic and confusion. As a realtor, I make a very good living from reading people. And his face said fear, not anxiety or stress or worry, genuine, honest fear, which, in my experience, is the result of encountering something unknown or without logic, without any apparent cause. What had he seen inside? I wondered. My son was far too soiled to ride in my car. I didn't have any drop cloths on hand, so I sent him in the back of a taxi back to my house, and I drove off to meet up with some other clients. I had a couple more appointments on the books for the day. It was too short notice to cancel, nor did I think it necessary. Then I'd go and check in on my son at my house, have him stay for dinner, and then send him back to his place. Throughout my visits with my clients and my drive home, the mystery of the Scout House veterans poked holes in my normally disciplined thoughts. Before I went back home, I decided to stop in quickly at the Scout House to check in with the constable if he was still there, or see for myself the state of the place. I really just wanted to see more, to make sense of the fear that I had seen in the constable's face, I guess. Sure enough, the constable sat in his cruiser in the gravelly weeds, where my son's puke was now frozen to ice. When I got out of the car, the constable saw me and he did the same. "Hello, Constable," I said casually. He nodded and made for the front door, looking for me to join him. We were both there to solve the mystery then. I opened the front door myself, and he didn't try to stop me from looking or from going in first. Another body, closer to the door, more decayed. Strings of muscle clung to bone in the bottom half of William Christopher's face. Same sweater, same army fatigues, same boots. The constable attempted to move past me, but I put my arm across the threshold, barring him from going in. "Wait," I said. The man listened and he backed out onto the stoop. I closed the door and I took a breath, hand still on the doorknob. No, it isn't. It's not. The constable started stammering. I lifted my palm toward him, indicating, wait. I didn't say it. I just used my hand. "Ma'am, we need to go back to the cruiser. I'll radio another crew right out here." The constable was going on about something, already backing away. I was so deep in thought. I began to open the door and close the door repeatedly. Aghast, the constable demanded, "Ma'am, are you okay?" As I focused inward like a child's flip book, I could see that the body moved each time towards me, decaying into dust, until that too had disappeared. And after it was gone, I kept testing, more opening and closing of the door. But there was no reconstruction of the body. The veteran had gone. I'm not sure what phenomenon had occurred in the scout house, but as always, I did not lose sight of my goal. "Problem solved," I told the constable. And he watched me drive away. The sale for the lot and the property on it went through 2 weeks later. The same foreign development team who had sent their 2 agents in earlier that day declined later to view the property a second time. It was just a dump to be torn down to them, and I did tend to agree. However, oddly enough, to this day the property sits there rotting untouched. That's none of my business, though. My part of the deal is done.